Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. It's been 100 days since President Karol Nawrocki took office, and already his actions, from refusing 46 judicial nominations to challenging the Prime Minister, are reshaping Poland's political landscape. Now, with 53% of Poles rating his performance as good or very good, the question remains now, is President Nawrocki navigating public approval the right way? How is it with institutional authority and cohabitation with the government in these early months? We're going to discuss that today with Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law and Administration, University of Warsaw, to analyze the first 100 days. Thanks so much for coming back to the studio. Good to have you.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, 53% of Poles seem to be quite happy with President Nawrocki. It's first 100 days. What do you think? Do you agree with it? Do you have a different opinion? How do we see these initial early months?
Well, Karol Nawrocki had a quite narrow victory because he won, it was not even 51%, it was less than 51% of his winning vote. However, currently he's supported by not only all of those people who voted for him, but probably some more people. However, we can explain that as a honeymoon effect because in politics it's often that a newly appointed president, the new public figure, is provoking quite a lot of curiosity. People are curious how he will perform. He's a new figure in Polish politics also, which also can be explained as this kind of curiosity effect. And I think that people are really interested in what will be happening. He's a very dynamic person. He is also improving quite a lot when it comes to his public appearances, public speeches. He's gathering a lot of interests around him. Which means also that he's quite prominent when it comes to this kind of public appearances. Also, he's very good when it comes to speaking to the people, going publicly. He's, for example, I could observe it, how he's patient when it comes to all these people who want to take a picture with him, photo opportunities and so on. He never refuses. Also, for example, 2 days ago in Warsaw, we had a big march when it comes to the celebration of Polish Independence Day, and he was not wearing a suit and a coat as a normal political figure would probably do, but he was wearing a short jacket. He was just looking as one of us, let's say, which means also that he's very popular when it comes to this kind of public image.
So, as you said, he's someone who doesn't shy away from attention. The curiosity is piqued. Despite the narrow victory, there's still 53% mostly positive, so that's an interesting thing to make. One thing which I think has piqued curiosity as well is, I mean, if we look at also the constitution of Poland, how this country works for foreign policy, very much as a more of a symbolic but very visual representation is the presidency. I mean, how would you say he's been handling foreign relations? I mean, he had that first trip over to the White House to meet Donald Trump, a political ally, but generally, how has that impacted this poll and generally the view of him?
Well, definitely his close alliance with Donald Trump is something very important for his public image, and he is perceived by public opinion also via this lens, because United States is very important ally of Poland, and his personal close relationship, we could see that when he visited the White House. Actually, United States, it was his first foreign trip, that the destination that he chose as a first foreign visit. So it was also quite significant that this relationship is also circulating about the security issues, because currently with the security situation in the eastern flank of NATO, it is really important to have close ties with all the NATO partners, but of course United States is one of the most important partners. So having this kind of close ties is also quite significant for his public image.
Yeah, and that's actually, I think, one of the very few things that actually both of these different political parties can generally agree on is defense and security that matters for Poland. But on that note, it also gets a little bit difficult, right? This so-called cohabitation, this idea of the presidency in one angle, and the other angle we have the prime minister and the government. There's been some tension, to say the least, but how would you class that right now? Is that, do you think, polarizing more? How do you take these first 100 days? Will Nawrocki carry on this kind of relationship with the Prime Minister? How do you see that in these 100 days and maybe into the future?
For sure, there is a huge ideological difference between the government and the president. Government is liberal. Well, of course, it's a coalition of different political parties, but let's say that the common denominator is being more liberal oriented, whereas president has a much more conservative right-wing agenda. What is also quite interesting is that even though the president was supported by the main opposition party, Law and Justice, that was ruling Poland for last 8 years, now he is positioning himself more as an independent person, so not being a member of any political force, any political party, but he's supported by the right-wing parties. But what we also can now observe is that far right-wing parties in Poland are gathering around him and maybe using him also for improving their visibility, increasing their visibility, treating him as an informal leader of this far-right movements. So indeed, there is a huge difference between the government and the president when it comes to these aspects, but also the activities of the president. So not only using his competences, but actually stretching those competences, because in Polish constitutional political system, president has rather limited competences. He has, let's say, more blocking competences. He has, for example, the power to veto the legislation, which he is quite often using.
I was going to ask on that, the veto note, because I mean, if we look at his predecessor, also similar political alignment, also uses veto, but not on this scale, right? It's only been those 100 days. Many things have already been vetoed by President Nawrocki. Do you see that as an overstretch of the office that he's in? Do we see more of that? Is this something that other presidents have done in the past? Or where do you see that going? Because if we compare him to Duda and now Nawrocki, he's definitely being more, let's say, assertive, shall we say that way?
Well, for sure, he's much more active and he positions himself also as a very kind of active president. But when it comes to the veto power, what needs to be understood is that the veto power is the power of the president, but it should be justified. So the president has the right to block, to veto the legislation, but in every instance, he also should provide the proper justification, which is not the case in many of the instances. One of the most important legislation that he blocked was supporting Ukrainian citizens living in Poland when it comes to social benefits. So he kind of enforced on the government changing to the law, because otherwise he refused to sign this legislation. So this is also quite important. But on the other hand, he is using his other competences by, for example, refusing to appoint new judges, which is one of the aspects of the rule of law crisis in Poland, which we are still facing, because the government, without the support of the president, is not able to propose and to kind of enforce the legislation that would reform the judicial system in Poland. But in a current situation, we still face a lot of negative consequences based on that. And him refusing to appoint new judges also contributes to this ongoing crisis. And unfortunately, there is no, let's say, constructive proposal also from his side how to solve this crisis, whereas this kind of agreement between the president and the government, the parliament, should be the base on reaching the proposal and then probably the legislative aspect of solving the rule of law crisis.
I mean, that, I think, in terms of, as you said, this back and forth, they'll probably continue, it sounds like, in terms of the cohabitation will be tough. The veto will be challenged again and again, so this doesn't look like it's going to go away. But in terms of, I want to move back to security, which is something that at least on paper, these two sides can agree on. When he's also been traveling a lot, he was also visiting allies in the region, also in the Baltic states, the Via Baltica and everything else. In terms of just security-wise, also very much getting at least a promise from Donald Trump that U.S. troops would not leave Poland.
Which is very significant as well, yeah.
Exactly. So I was going to say, in terms of security, is there an area where you think this president gets good marks in your way and looking into the future, or is this just temporary?
Well, for sure, the president is more American-oriented than European-oriented in his foreign policy. And in the ideal world, there would be a division of agreement between the government and the president about the focus of their foreign policy. I mean, we need to remember that the foreign policy is, the competence of the government, of the Council of Ministers, However, the president is representing the country. And because of his close personal ties to Donald Trump, we could foresee that his alignment, his leadership in this aspect of the foreign policy could be quite beneficial for the country, whereas the government, especially with the Prime Minister Donald Tusk's personal relations with a lot of European leaders, could mean that the government could focus on the European aspect of the foreign policy of Poland. Unfortunately, that's not entirely the case, because there is a lot of disagreement, and I think that also the foreign policy is part of the instruments, the tool that is used against both of the actors, so the government and the president. So they are failing still to reach this kind of agreement that would contribute to proper design of the foreign policy of the country.
So it's 100 days, already some controversy, but overall, if we look at those polls, it's mostly in the green at the moment. It's positive. We'll see how the next 100 days go. But also one person by his side, the First Lady, right? Jowanka Nawrocki, also getting, I think, good remarks. So that's also, I think, part of this whole package, but we'll have to close it there. It's always a pleasure. Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay tuned. There's much more always here on TVP World, so don't go away. Goodbye.